Yeah, that's an interesting, yeah, that's very interesting because one of the things we heard at S4 here recently that I happen to agree with is that asset and understanding your assets are important, but what impact do they truly have on what you're protecting? If I have a control space and it's got different PLCs and different HMIs and different drives and servos, I need to protect them all. So the fact that one is a Rockwell with part number XYZ really doesn't matter to me. And if you look at the 62443, which breaks down control systems into zones and conduits, it's really not interested in the device, right? It's more interested in the zones and the conduits and protection of that. Um, but you still want to know what's on your network, and it's still important to know what's on your network. So, the ICS360 Defender does the asset detection, tells you what's there, allows you to build rules around containment and what can get in, what can get out. So it's kind of like the best of both. You get protection from the Defender side of things, plus you get visibility into what's on your network and what's changing on your network. The whole Defender came about because I couldn't get what I wanted from anybody else back in 2010 when I started designing the thing. Or if I could get close to what I wanted, it was $25,000, and that just wasn't that was not there was no appetite for that, right? Because 2010 nobody knew what OT cybersecurity was. So if you think it's difficult to convince management today to bring it in, try it in 2010 when they don't even know what malware is yet to speak of or understand what all of that means. So that's kind of the whole idea behind the Defender and why we brought it into being. So the Defender is a perimeter appliance. I call it Perimeter Plus because the ICS 360 Defender, it's a next generation firewall, supports all the capabilities that you would expect from a stateful firewall, does incident detection. But a lot of our customers want more control. And one of the things I like to say, which some people consider contentious, is that visibility without control is not cybersecurity. It's just simply visibility. That's akin to saying, by the way, you have the plague. Well, that's great. I would have liked to know, beforehand that what the plague was and the plague was coming and that we could prevent the plague. But since I have it now, how do I fix it, right? And that's what visibility does for you. So the real goal is to prevent. And so when you tie an ICS 360 Defender together with our software-defined networking solution, you get really a culmination in the best of both, right? You still want the perimeter security with the Defender, but now I have east-west control across the switch, right? So you have, there's no other thing out there today that can truly, without a lot of pain and suffering, um, protect east-west across a single switch, right? If I can plug into a managed switch, chances are I can do what I want. Now, are there solutions that say they do that type of thing? Yes. Are they painful to manage and put in place and work sometimes? Yes. With this, it's the network fabric, and we know what's on the network at all times. If you plug something in, we'll know within milliseconds that it's on the network, what switch it's plugged into, where it's plugged in, what protocols it's trying to talk, and what devices it's trying to talk to, all without adding overhead to the network, which is another huge issue with a lot of these tools that are out there today. Zero trust. It's a interesting topic these days. It's a buzzword that a lot of people use. Um, you really have to define more along the lines of what zero trust is because it really means different things. Is it zero trust of devices on the network, meaning all devices have to be authenticated? Is it zero trust of people on the network? Is it, what do we mean by zero trust? Is it just requiring all things always to authenticate? I've had people suggest that zero trust means no protocols, no communications, no nothing, unless the device is trusted. And really, I would argue that there is no such thing as true zero trust from a specifically device perspective. And the reason for that is traditional or networking today, irrespective of the type of network, requires that a system ARP. So you plug it in, it sends out a message saying, I'm on the network. This is an IP address I want. If you don't put that on the network, the device can't join the network, so you can't decide if it's trustworthy or not. So therefore, by definition, it cannot be truly zero trust. I will say that our software-defined networking controller is as close to zero trust as you can get. We have the ability to control broadcast traffic. We have the ability to control multicast traffic, layer 2 traffic, layer 3 traffic. And in fact, we control the ARPs. When something comes on the network and it ARPs, that ARP goes to the controller from the switch, and the controller can make decisions based on that ARP. So that's, in my opinion, as close as you can get to zero trust today for the actual device side of the network, right? ACLs, all of that sort of thing. It's not zero trust. For any of that to work, there already had to be some communications taking place. Therefore, it's not zero trust. Now, from a people perspective, that's different. From a people perspective, we're saying the device is already trusted by whatever means we've decided to do it. If you're thinking ahead, it's SDN. And once the device is, maybe their laptop, proved and trusted, when they try to log in with credentials, then, right, you can truly not allow them on the network, not give them resources, not let them connect to things. And that's zero trust. You don't trust anybody until they authenticate. You're not trying to say, I don't trust the underlying mechanism. You're saying, I don't trust that person and any actions they might take until they are authenticated. And so from that perspective, zero trust is attainable today. And our software-defined networking solution, as far as I'm concerned, and somebody hasn't been able to prove me wrong, is as close to zero trust as you can get from specifically a device level, what's physically connected to my network. So the use case is someone has machine X, let's just say it's a tire machine. So they have a tire machine and they're on the plant floor. They have proximity access to the equipment. So by having proximity access to the equipment, you've already opened up the attack surface drastically. They have proximity access. However, having said that, in a traditional networking environment, you have certain things you can do in that you could make them plug into a certain port on the front of the panel. And if that was, a specific VLAN that went back to an appliance like the Defender, and you could really make that person log in with a captive portal and do certain things. So you have a certain amount of trust there. But if they plug into the switch, if they know how to open the panel up, most of them do because they're there to work on their equipment, and they know what ports to plug into, or they have access to the configuration plane on the switch, meaning it's my machine, so I can log into this switch and I can make this port talk to anything on the switch. I could trunk it across all the VLANs. Well, there's really nothing you as an end user, as a customer, can do because that person has that access. So that's a decentralized control, right, at the switching layer. If you take that and look at it from a software-defined networking perspective, the switch is really, it's an appliance. It has no centralized configuration capabilities, meaning there is no UI. So even though that supplier's on your plant floor and he plugs into port 10 of a switch and his PLC is on port 11, unless he's authorized to talk to that PLC on that port using that protocol, that PLC period using that protocol, he can't do it. And nor does he have an avenue where he can log into the switch and change configuration to allow him to do it. That's all centrally managed from the SDN controller side of things. So it significantly decreases the attack surface in the case of people having proximity to the equipment.
And that use case would be the same for other verticals. Intelligent buildings, you gain access to a closet on a floor. Substations, you gain access to the substation. Water treatment plants, you gain access to the plant floor itself. You're still, unless
anytime you use a decentralized form of management and you push multiple management interfaces, if I have a building and it has 40 switches in it, and I can walk up and plug into any one of those 40 switches and gain access to the management interface, you have a problem. And it's extremely difficult to try to manage that. Now you have certain things going for you. Obviously, hopefully not everybody knows what the login and password is. Hopefully not everybody can SSH into it. Hopefully not everybody has a console cable. But there's a lot of people that do. And if it's somebody that brought the equipment in, or it's a disgruntled former employee, or you name it, it's a resulting attack surface that's not overly difficult to compromise. If that building is running on an SDN solution and nobody but approved people have access to the controller, then you can have those 40 switches and none of them are an attack surface because you can't manage them locally. You can't connect to them locally. They don't take their direction from anywhere but the SDN controller. And unless that person can compromise the SDN controller, they have no control over the switches. The question is, how do I allow people to remotely access controls equipment on the plant floor? And is there an instance where I would do that without having a secondary person actually on the plant floor? So I'm in New York. I want to access a plant floor piece of equipment in Michigan, and I don't have somebody who can be on the floor in Michigan. First of all, is you don't do that ever because it's a safety problem. You need to have someone on the floor at the equipment with line of sight. Make sure there's no safety issues. Make sure there's nobody doing something they shouldn't do when the equipment just starts moving. So you never remotely access equipment without somebody on the floor with line of sight, unless you're willing to live with the fact that you could take somebody's arm off in a machine. That aside, assuming you have a person on the plant floor who can have line of sight to the equipment, or maybe it's not controls equipment, maybe it's just a data collection, maybe it's just an array of sensors, in which case that restriction becomes less required, less important. There's a number of ways to do it. If you use the ICS360 Defender, it supports multiple ways of remotely connecting to it, from traditional SSL VPNs and IPsec VPNs, the newer WireGuard technology. All of that can be facilitated from a Defender. And you can even use a feature called a captive portal, which would require a person to authenticate. And you can do it a number of different ways. They have to have a particular certificate on their system. They have to have a login and password. They have to have a voucher, which was provided by you, which lets them in for a certain amount of time and then removes their access. Or you can use any combination of all of them simultaneously. So, people talk about two-factor authentication. Well, if I have to have a certificate, I have to have a voucher, and I have to have a password, that's three-factor authentication. So you can very, very securely control who can get in and what they can do using the ICS360 Defender. And if you couple that with the SDN controller, it gets much more granular and much more powerful. Zones and conduits. So zones and conduits is a concept that's been around a long time. It's mostly talked about in the context of IEC ISA 62443. And the idea is that you break, you can have an enterprise network connect to a DMZ between enterprise and then connect to a processor controls network below that. You can have a DMZ connect directly to, an enterprise network connect directly to a control system. And the idea behind zones and conduits is defining what zones or levels of the network there are, and then what are the conduits in between them. So it's really, it's really the same approach that people have looked at for a long time. It's kind of like IIoT. We've added a flashy new name to it, calling it zones and conduits. So now it's important and it's really big. But fundamentally, it's breaking your network down into network levels and how you allow, what you allow between them in terms of communications and traffic. And, there's a lot of ways to go about that. You can, I know customers whose enterprise network connects to an ICS Defender at the head end of every assembly system. Okay, that's great, because what I've effectively done is created an extremely small DMZ in that Defender platform. And of course, it connects back, if it's done right, to another vendor firewall on the enterprise side. But it's essentially putting a cap at the head of every bottle instead of having this great big area with all these devices connected into it. So it's a great approach. I actually like that approach. But the thing it doesn't give you is, you can allow this device to talk to that device, and you can allow it to talk over a particular port. If it's a tool like the ICS360 Defender, you can control it down to deep packet inspection of industrial protocols. So you can, let somebody sitting at the desk at headquarters talk to a PLC that they can read. It's only read only, right? So they can't make a change. So actually throw this back to your remote access use case. If you're using the Defender and your guy from New York can still connect to the plant floor in Detroit, but he's not allowed to change anything. See what's going on and do some troubleshooting, and something could affect the change. So the Defender gives you that capability. But again, it doesn't take care of east-west across the switch. So people will start segmenting into VLANs in the controls or process area. And let's face it, controls people don't get the concept behind VLANs. And I know one customer that's got something on the order of 14 VLANs in a switch on the plant floor, and every time there's a problem, plant floor engineering, maintenance people's head melt as they try to figure out what's what and what's wrong and what's not the right way. So VLANs are a methodology imposed upon us by traditional networking to segment the network. And trying to do that on the plant floor is painful, painful, painful. And even so, it's painful at the enterprise and everywhere else. That's why you see SD-WAN becoming so popular. That's SDN at the enterprise level. Cloud space is predominantly SDN. It's rolling through the enterprise. And when you look at the plant floor, bringing SDN to the plant floor offers the concept of microsegmentation. So it's no longer what's plugged into what port. I don't care what port it's plugged into. It's this device is allowed to talk to that device. And then you take it another step and you say, this device can talk to that device over this protocol. So now you have really segmented the network without the need of VLANs, right? So SDN, take away VLANs, don't need them. SDN, take away things like spanning trees, take away the ability to create a loop in the network because SDN won't allow that. It just simplifies network management drastically, adds a tremendous layer of security to the network, and just solves most of the problems that people have dealing with plant floor networks. Just because they're not taking these, let's just call them long in the tooth IT concepts of traditional networking and trying to cram them down into a plant floor. We don't have the kind of time in the day to talk about all the things the Defender can do. But having said that, one of the problems with solutions today is they're not really a tool which supplies all the functionality that you need. You need remote access capabilities. You need to be able to protect systems, from external influences like the enterprise network. You need to be able to NAT between supplier machine. There's a lot of companies that will build machines, they're cookie cutter machines, and they always use the same IP addresses. So if you have 3 of those machines, how do you put them directly on your network? You can't. So the Defender not only adds a layer of protection, you can also configure and enable NAT. You can have remote access to it while you monitor the assets on that particular machine. More importantly, when you look at traditional NAT devices, they're not very smart. It's kind of like garbage in, garbage out. What goes in one side comes out the other side. With the Defender, we took it a lot further than that. And so you can configure a NAT, but you can also control what gets in and out of the NAT by firewall rules. And the wizard that we created automatically generates firewall rules for you that stop something called NAT bleed, which is traffic that bleeds from the lower level network to the higher level network. So the Defender prevents that. And it's also very, very secure out of the gate, but you can even go further and add more protections from a NAT perspective. So the Defender was designed by plant floor people because we have a handful of things to solve. And, back in the day, it was, oh, look at this device. It does remote access. Great. So we spent 2 months evaluating it, put it in. 3 months later, our needs changed and we realized we need to be able to prevent people from flashing PLCs on us or downloading the PLCs. So now I need deep packet inspection. All right, so can I use my original device for that? Probably not, right? So now I need another device. So now I've got 2 devices. Neither of them work the same way. They don't have the same part numbers, so they're a pain to manage from a storage perspective. They're a pain to manage from a training perspective because they don't work the same way. And it adds significant cost, right? You can't just add another layer of devices, right? The more layers you add to a controls network, the more layers you add to a controls network, the more risk you're putting in place. So you have all these devices, they become single points of failure. So with the ICS360 Defender, you get a lot of the capabilities that you need on the floor. And if you're really, uptime conscious, you can have a redundant ICS Defender, which supports a hot failover. So then there's 2 of them, 3 of them, whatever makes sense. to make sure that whatever it is you're talking to stays online. When you look at the malware and the ransomware and these different organizations who are trying to solve, figure out how to get into the system, a lot of the attacks come from the enterprise side of the network because that's the more internet facing. So, having good protection between the enterprise and the plant floor is important. When you look at the attack surfaces, it's really a matter of, in the IT space, you have to allow everything except that which you suspect to be bad or know to be bad. So if somebody comes up with an all new badness, chances are your system doesn't know about it, and that's why it's called a 0-day vulnerability. When you look at, or they're typically called 0-day vulnerabilities. When you look at what we do on the Defender perspective, our perspective is allow nothing except that which we know to be explicitly good. So, we had an issue, everybody had an issue a few years ago with WannaCry. WannaCry used to hijack some Microsoft SMB protocol, and there were certain ports that were known to be, used by WannaCry. Any place that we had a Defender, and we had customers that mentioned it to us or came back and told us this, any place we had a Defender was safe because we simply don't allow the SMB protocol on the network. We don't allow it between the devices that don't need to see it. And if we do allow it, we can schedule when we allow it and then turn it off. So we have a significant amount of control over those protocols. So if you don't allow anything but what you know to be good, then you don't have to worry about what's bad because it's just not allowed. And so what's important in the tools that we've built is that we help you figure out what's good. And then once we help you figure out what's good, it's very easy to engage a set of rules that says nothing but what's good gets through, right? And then, of course, you have to make it easy to keep that up to date and manage it. And trying to do that without creating a full-time job for somebody is important, right? And we've got the plant floor chops to know what that takes and know how to do that. So malware doesn't get in if the mechanism that somebody hijacks to get it isn't allowed. And you can stop it at the firewall level. You can stop it at the software-defined network. You get the plant floor level, and that's really the biggest advantage. Most people's solutions is, like I said, allow everything except what we think or know to be bad. Whereas we take the approach, allow nothing except that which we know to be good. We also go another step further, and with the Defender products, if you look at some of the products that are out there, one comes to mind that we were just talking about is it's got, 2 uplink ports and then 8 ports. But what most people don't realize is those 8 ports are a switch. So you get, it's not segmentation from a physical perspective. With the Defender, when you have 8 ports, you have 8 individual ports. So things like VLAN hopping is not possible. Compromising one network from another is not possible because you have control of all that traffic. From a switch perspective, you might be controlling what comes into that 8-port switch to those 2 ports that go up, but you're not stopping anything east to west across that particular firewall appliance. In our case, you are.